Hello, welcome back to Invisible InCourage with the Invisible Disabilities Association. Today I am here with Dr. Beth Morton, and we're discussing her efforts in research, advocacy, and her journey with chronic migraine. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Kelly.
So tell us a little about your journey with education and then how migraine has affected that.
Yeah, so I was living in Boston and in the middle of finishing my PhD when my migraine attacks decided to become a problem. It was episodic for about 20 years, and then in the last year of my PhD, it was just sort of the perfect storm of stressful events. I had the stress of finishing a dissertation. I was working almost full time, and I had some sort of personal family stress, and all of those things kind of combined. And my migraine attacks went from episodic to chronic pretty quickly over a period of about 6 months. So I finished my PhD. I worked for another about 6 to 8 months. And then they became just too, even with accommodations, my work was great at giving me all the accommodations that we could come up with, and I could still not keep up. I tried. I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening who are like me can relate to that. So yeah, that's sort of how my invisible disability became a little less invisible, I guess. That's when I couldn't really hide it anymore.
Exactly. And the emotional, financial, social, like every part of your life is impacted when you have to, give up working and prioritize your health, really.
Exactly. It became it was a point where chronic migraine, and even before that, I had developed another chronic illness which had sort of started to impact my life in some pretty meaningful ways, but chronic migraine really at that point was impacting every decision I made. Like you said, it impacted work, social, school, and every decision I made from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed was affected by, am I having an attack? Am I going to have an attack? And it became a huge part of my life.
And the way our society is ordered, there's so much value on what your occupation is, what you're doing, and when it feels like you're almost providing nothing, it's such a huge burden to carry.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go on, will you explain what episodic and chronic migraine mean?
Yeah, so episodic migraine is when you have fewer than 15 attacks per month, and chronic migraine is 15 or more headache days per month. And of those, I think 8 of them need to have migraine features. So sort of the light sensitivity, the nausea, the sort of the other migraine symptoms beyond the head pain that you might have.
So you're living with chronic pain every day?
For me, yep. So for chronic migraine, not everybody does. For me, I have migraine symptoms every day at this point, and that's despite my best efforts at trying every treatment. I am the person who a treatment comes out and I am the first one to sometimes literally the first person to bug my doctor, my headache specialist, and say, it was just approved. What do I need to do to get it? And sometimes my insurance company doesn't even have it on the formulary yet, and I have to set reminders in my calendar to call them back week by week until they get it set up. So yeah, and despite all that, my migraine has been stubborn.
So you are constantly researching with that. How does research help empower you to take some control back?
Yeah, so my PhD was in research. My PhD was in education research, and I was working in education program evaluation. And when my career was derailed, I decided my best thing to do was to start researching myself and migraine. And so I kind of turned my efforts inward and learned everything I could about migraine. And so at first it was it was kind of a very personal and, you know, selfish thing to do. I just wanted to learn everything I could to help myself. And then got to a point where I was like, okay, I've learned what I can, and I'm seeing that other people are where I was 6 months ago, a year ago. What can I do to help them? Can I do anything to help others that were like me? Like, it's very, I guess I felt like I had some advantage having the background I have in research. It's not clinical research. It's not even in health, but I knew statistics and I knew how to read an academic paper. So I had a little bit of an advantage over other migraine patients. So I was a little more equipped to break down some of the research and help others. So I've been trying to do that as much as I can. I know there are many people who are better equipped, but I feel like if I can do what I can, that's kind of been what I've been trying to do as a sort of pay it forward.
You've done such an incredible job. I have been following you for so long, and all of your research breakdowns are so helpful. So tell us ways that you have been breaking down the research and making it more accessible.
Well, I'd like to do more and try to do it more formally, but a lot of what I do is, Twitter is kind of my home base. That's where I like to. It's just you can get a lot of information across on Twitter, and there's a lot of great people to follow on Twitter. So I think when I first when my attacks were first becoming chronic, I spent a lot of time in Facebook groups, and I would say even 3 years ago, some of the groups I was in were not as high quality as some of the ones that are out there now. There's some really great Facebook groups out there that are led by some really great migraine advocates that vet the research that they share very well. And so those are great resources. But when I was first looking on Facebook, I felt like I wasn't getting, I wasn't feeling like the information I was seeing was this sort of the quality I was looking for. So I somehow kind of wandered over to Twitter and was finding, oh, well, here I'm finding more sort of, I guess, primary sources. I could see the authors of papers. I could follow headache specialists. I could, tweet at them and be like, your paper's great. Could I maybe get a copy? Because I lost access to, now that I'm not at school, I have to pay for it. So I ended up on Twitter, and a lot of times I will just, I think the greatest trick is you just sign up for Google Alerts and you get your daily alert in migraine or headache or cluster headache or, post-concussion syndrome, whatever the topic is you want, you get it delivered to your inbox, and there's some great articles in there. And then I just retweet them. And if I feel like there's some caveat, like, hey guys, this is a great article, but there were only 30 people in it, or it wasn't randomized, it was, there was no control group. So, there's only so much you can do in a tweet, but, and I probably, what I'd love to do on my blog is, if I have more time, I've kind of set up a space, and I need to be more vigilant about it, is I'd like to, take some of those tweets and put a little more context around them and say a little more about, the pros and cons to some of the research. But, best laid plans.
And so on here, you set up a way that if anyone has a migraine question whatsoever, they can use a specific hashtag, and then everyone will answer.
Yeah. So for the last year and a half, we've been doing these migraine chats. So once a month we have migraine chat, and that's been great. We have a few regulars every month. We get a few new people, and there's a topic, sort of a rotating topic that I try to keep really timely and relevant. But I follow on Twitter, I follow this person, Brianne Vaness, who's fantastic, and she's incredible. she's really cultivated this great following around everybody, just a general chronic illness, disability, invisible illnesses, disabilities, undiagnosed people. Like, it's a really great community. And she has this hashtag for people to just use for questions, even just rants, and or I'm having the symptom, what is it, kind of thing. And so I asked her one day, like, would you be okay if I borrowed your idea for migraine? I like we had this hashtag for migraine for people who was like, I've got this question about migraine, and they could put the hashtag in, and I can kind of follow it, find it, retweet it. And she was more than okay with that. And so in the last month, 6 weeks, we've been trying to use that. So if I see a migraine question, I'll attach the hashtag, and it's sort of slowly people are finding it and using it, and that's been great. It's been sort of a good way to tag questions on Twitter for others with migraine to find an answer and be sort of a common thread.
Right. And you've also been being the science editor for a specific magazine about migraine, correct?
Yes, My Chronic Brain. It's a great resource specifically for people with chronic migraine. The sort of articles about just sort of ways to thrive and live your best life despite the ways that chronic migraine can have an effect on your life. So there's still lots of ways that you can adapt and accommodate and still have sort of as normal a life as possible. And so there's a lot of great articles about sort of regular, sort of mainstream treatments and sort of alternative treatments, and just great artists that also have migraine, and the art that they create around themes related to migraine, ways to exercise in really gentle and ways that accommodate a migraine body. So features on other advocates, and just how that advocacy is multifaceted. And I hope I don't lose my power. Just a fair warning, we're getting the tropical storm. So so sorry. There's lots of great articles and a great team of writers and editors. And
what are some tips that you have about maintaining a sense of normalcy and trying to maintain as much control and, like I said, normalcy over your life when every single minute you're impacted by your disease?
Yeah, that's funny. That's hard. I think I try to do as many of the same activities that I used to do, and find a lot of the same, like even some of the same distractions. That some of the things that I use as distractions now are the activities that I enjoyed before. So I try to still find comfort and fun in the pastimes and activities that I used to do before. So, and I think that's something I try to remind my friends and family of, that like I can still, on my good days, I can still do the things that that you remember me doing. So that's it's not every day, but yeah.
So like that, what can they do, your friends and family and loved ones, what can they do to show you that they care, whether you're having a really hard day or a better day? Like, what are some gestures that mean a lot that most people wouldn't think about?
I think what really helps is to come up with like concrete offers. It can be really hard when you're
Definitely
in pain or just not feeling well. And that can just be all consuming. So when someone says, let me know what you need, or, and it's just sort of this big offering, it can be really hard to say, I need this. So I think, and it part of it might be that we need to say, that, these are the 6 things I need help with. So on a bad day, can you just ask me for my grocery list and go get groceries? Or can you do a load of laundry for me? Or, come drop off some safe, here are 5 safe recipes for me. Could you just keep them on hand? And, if I'm having a bad week, make one and drop it off for me, and I know we're kind of in this weird pandemic times where some of this is hard, but as much as you can help your friends and family when they're dealing with a flare up and have concrete offers, it's a lot easier than sometimes it can be hard to be the sick person and come up with specific things when you're really just like
got nothing.
Yeah, got nothing.
Incredible tips. I love those. I read somewhere that someone suggested to give gift certificates to either food delivery services for when they're feeling too bad to even make a meal, or also through driving services. So in case like their medication or they're just not like feeling well and they lose the ability to drive for either, forever or just that day or that afternoon, they can actually get to different places, which is a huge help that, again, who would think about?
Unless you live in rural southern Vermont where Uber and Uber Eats don't exist. But otherwise, those are fantastic ideas. Yes.
Yeah, that probably not so helpful for you.
Not where I live, but those are great ideas otherwise.
All right, so Beth, what advice would you give to yourself if you could talk to yourself who was just newly diagnosed or even maybe newly chronic?
Yeah. I think I did pretty well for myself. I feel like I would kind of give myself the same advice as to sort of what I did. I, find a community that find people that are like you. Because I think what I realized is my doctors were helpful, but you only have so much time with them, and they're doctors. They aren't living in your body. So find other people who are like living in the same reality, dealing with, do I take my meds? I've got a migraine every day. So how do I figure out what days I'm going to take my meds? What do I do on the days I can't take my meds? I can only take them so many times. Like, I literally find people who have to go through those types of decisions.
How do you do that? How do you find them?
So, I mean, like I said, I started out going to Facebook, and that was semi-successful. I find that was at least a good place to start. And I think right now there are some great Facebook groups that are focused on new treatments, and there's some that focus on sort of lifestyle and diet and sort of the sort of lifestyle changes and managing that. So there are a couple of really good, big, well moderated groups that are out there that I don't think existed. If they existed, they were much smaller, and they weren't the first ones I found when I was sort of looking. There's, I think, a good community on Twitter, a good community on Instagram.
So
and everybody
hashtag or search, for example, migraine. If someone had
search like migraine, search chronic migraine. If you're on Twitter, search migraine chat. I'll plug that. There's, we do the chat once a month, and in between there's hopefully there's going to be more communication in between on Twitter with just like people posting questions. So
love that.
Hopefully that grows. But I think if you find people who are like you, or find other advocates, even pick up any of the issues of my chronic brain, read through those. There's been some great features on other advocates in there.
There's something so validating about just meeting someone, even if it's online, that says, yeah, me too. Like, that.
And I think following some of the big organizations, the American Migraine Foundation and the Migraine World Summit, and some of these, that put out some great educational information, and also feature headache specialists that are sharing very relevant treatment information. They feature advocates. I think you'll sort of quickly, it's a very kind of close-knit community. I think once you kind of get in, you'll find it. So I think once you're in it, the learning curve is much shorter than, if you can kind of break through.
So you said to follow the organizations that are like national or international leaders for that condition. I think that's a good tip. What other tips do you have on finding research that's valid and isn't just a bogus treatment from the ends of the internet? How can we tell what's real, what can help, and what is likely just to drain our money or drain our resources or possibly even hurt us?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, so I gave a whole talk on that. So
Ooh.
I could do a whole other half hour on that. Yeah, right. I would say some quick tips. Definitely following organizations that are like sort of the nonprofits in your diagnosis. Following, even if you're not super confident about reading academic articles, if you follow those journals, sometimes they will share more layperson, user-friendly summaries of the articles. So you can still follow the journals and read the abstracts or the summaries of the papers. So if you can figure out what the common journals are, and so like the headache or some of the big journals in migraine are worth following. I think I try to stay away from. I get wary of any sort of any product that is being sort of marketed by the company that makes it without any independent evaluation of it. So I kind of want to see if it's been independently tested somehow.
How can you test for that? How do we know?
Yeah, that can be hard. And a lot of times it doesn't exist. So in that case, if it's a pretty low risk thing, like I don't know, like some sort of something that's going to just give you comfort, like I can't even come up with a good example, but it's something that's fairly low risk. I will still probably try it because at this point I've tried everything. So if there's a pretty low risk of side effects, I may still try it. But if it's some device that's kind of like, ew, I'm not, I'd like to see you guys. I'd like to see some, actual evidence of it. And if there isn't anything on their website, or it isn't clear that it was actually independently tested, and it can't clearly tell that, then I probably stay away from it and stick to things that like my doctor recommends, or I can see has kind of come out of more clinical trials versus a private kind of thing.
Have you ever brought up a new therapy with the doctor to ask him whether he or she thought it was valid or thought it could be dangerous? Is that an option?
I have, yeah. Usually it's something that's sort of in that range of like, this is new, I've heard about it. It hasn't gone through maybe the clinical trials, but it's people are buzzing about it. What do you think about it? And generally, if it's if my doctor says something like, I don't see how it could harm you, it seems pretty low risk, it seems like it's safe to try, then that's kind of where I'll just go ahead and try it and trust that it's pretty safe. Those are usually the kind of, like I said, the lights, or the heat packs, or things that are pretty minimal risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any misconceptions about chronic pain, migraine, invisible disabilities, etc., that you want to clear up right now?
I think the one big one lately that that I was guilty of myself was that, the whole time I was episodic, the whole time I had episodic migraines, meaning like for 20 years, I had maybe one or two migraine attacks a month.
Mhm.
And I had no idea that I could end up with migraine every day. So I think I was guilty of being almost that person that thought migraine was just the headache. I'll take pop a pill, I'll take my triptan, and in 4 hours I'll be okay. I'll go back to work. I might need to take the morning off, but what's the big deal? So now that I'm on the other side, I'm very aware of that. Migraine is not just a headache. There's the head pain. There's I can't think straight. Nauseous. The light's bothering me. Everything hurts. There's a laundry list of symptoms, and there's an enormous amount of stigma attached to migraine because I think people generally think that it is a very simple disease, and sometimes even people who have a milder form of migraine don't realize that it can be as severe, and so it's hard, I think. And I don't say that as anything against, I guess, anyone with migraine. It's just a misunderstanding that there's this continuum, and the severity that it can take on, and sort of the stigma of.
Absolutely. I've noticed even within just any kind of chronic illness, a lot of us tend to be judgmental just because if I was going through that, I would be able to do that. Or if I was
Yeah,
in an attack, I want to be able to be on the computer. But some of us don't
right.
have that option or that privilege. And it's just internalizing all of the stigma that we're trying to combat versus being
Yeah,
understanding and empathetic and just trying to understand that we just have to believe people. Just
yes.
believe what people are saying.
Yeah, and at some point, I mean, I think a lot of people who are chronic and, daily or near daily get that a lot. Like you wouldn't be doing an interview with Kellie for half an hour if you were in the middle of a migraine attack. Well, if I didn't do X, Y, and Z during the middle of a migraine attack, I wouldn't do 90% of what I do. So you just at some point kind of you just you just do things, and some people, everybody's experience is different, and that you just have to believe people, no matter however it manifests. You have to believe people. Some people can do more than others, and that is okay.
Right.
That's what they can do.
Absolutely. All right. So to close out, I wanted to talk about the emotional burden of having a physical ailment. So you had to give up so much for your health, and that's definitely not where you expected to be. You did not expect to have to give up your career, move to a place that you didn't necessarily want to be. There's just so much. You didn't expect to have every aspect of your life almost controlled by your disability. And so, through your toughest times and your darkest hours, what gives you the courage just to get through one more day? How do you keep going?
I think it's a lot of times it's just knowing that there's a lot of smart people out there studying migraine and trying to find a solution. That even in the last 2 years, we've had kind of all these new treatments come out, and no, they haven't worked great for me, but there are more in the pipeline, and they're studying other mechanisms, and they're working on it, and yes, it's slow, but like I literally on my worst days sometimes lay in bed and think, okay, there's hope that there are people working on this. Someday something will work. And I just tell myself that someday research will catch up with me, and that finally actually doing research on treatments for migraine, and we are not getting just hand-me-down drugs from other diseases, and it's moving faster than it ever has. So it may sound like a strange thing to hang my hope on, but that's what it is.
I love that. I think that makes perfect sense for your hope to, again, stem from research, just like most of your efforts.
Yep.
I love that. Well, Beth, thank you so much for being on here today, and thank you for helping us go through research, tactics, and just what to look out for. I appreciate it so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone. See you Thursday.